Together we sing, Najib. While we remain standing, we'll take the third stanza as our opening prayer. Together we pray, O God of all creation, grant this our one request. Help us to build a nation where no man is oppressed, and so with peace and plenty, Nigeria may be blessed. Amen. You may kindly be seated. Thank you very much. I'd like to once again warmly welcome each and every one of you to day 3 of the 32nd Engineering Assembly. Without further ado, we'll be moving on to the program of today's event, as I welcome up to the stage to coordinate the inauguration of the Sector Skills Council for Engineering, Engineer Precious Onoha. A round of applause, please.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished engineering practitioners, guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. My name is Engineer Precious Onoha, and I'll be your master of ceremony for this section of the event, being the inauguration of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. And so on behalf of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, and the National Board for Technical Education, NBTE, I warmly welcome you all. The National Council on Skills established a committee on coordination of ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as state programs on skills to tackle critical issues in the skills development sector. Very quickly, I would like to recognize the presence of very distinguished guests in our midst. We would like to recognize the chairman of the Sector Skills Council, who is none other than the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON. I would like to recognize the presence of none other than the President and Chairman in Council of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, none other than Engineer Professor Sadiq Zubair Abubakar, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, fellow Academy of Engineering. Please, let's welcome him. You're welcome, sir. I would also like to recognize the presence of the Executive Secretary of the National Board for Technical Education, MBTE, Engineer Professor Idris Mohammed Bugaje. We also have the Special Senior Advisor to the President on TVET, Technical and Vocational Education and Training, Madam Abiola Arogundade. She is also ably represented by the Executive Secretary of MBTE. I would like to recognize the presence of other sector skill councils here duly represented. We have in our midst this morning the Director General of the National Power Training Institute, NAPTIN, Mr. Ahmed Bolaji Nagode. He is the chairman of the Sector Skills Council for the power industry. Let's appreciate him. We also have the registrar of COBAN, the Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, representing the Sector Skills Council for Building. You're welcome, sir. Representing the Sector Skills Council for the automotive industry is the representative from the National Automotive Design and Development Council, NADDC. You're welcome, sir. We also have representing the Sector Skills Council for Occupational Health and Safety from Occupational Health and Safety, OSHA, UK. You're welcome. Representing the Sector Skills Council for ICT is the Digital Bridge Institute. You're welcome. Thank you for making it a date with us this morning. Representing the Sector Skills Council for Oil and Gas is a representative from the Education and Training Sectorial Working Group of the Nigerian Content Consultative Forum, which was established by the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, NCDMB. Please, a round of applause for them. I would also like to recognize the representative from AFOS Foundation, Lagos, who is representing the Sector Skills Council for Agric and Agro Processing. In our midst this morning is the President of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, none other than Engineer Margaret Aina Oguntala, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, fellow Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers. You're welcome, ma'am. As we go on with the event, I will recognize other dignitaries. At this point, I would like to welcome to the podium for his opening remarks, Engineer A.D.K. He is the Director, Skills Development from the National Board for Technical Education, MBTE. Please, a round of applause for him as he makes his way to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you. The President of Council, the Executive Secretary, National Board for Technical Education, the DG, NAPTIN, please may I stand on the existing protocol and welcome our invited and distinguished members of the high table. May I also recognize the engineering family and welcome you to this very gigantic and momentous occasion in the history of engineering in Nigeria. The National Board for Technical Education has commenced the Nigerian Skills Qualifications Framework, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council some few years ago. Since its inauguration by the Honorable Minister of Education, we have tried to see that COREN is part and parcel of this framework and is in the driver's seat of the engineering profession with respect to the Nigerian Skills Qualifications Framework. However, it is said that it is better late than never done. We have, under this particular President, Engineer Professor Sadiq, that COREN has become a full member of the Sector Skills Council for Engineering, an awarding body. This, we would like to express our unreserved gratitude to Mr. President. The Executive Secretary, although he's seated here, has also requested that I express the board's gratitude to the Nigerian Society of Engineering, who has also shown a lot of collaboration with the board with respect to the Nigerian Skills Qualifications Framework. Having said that, I wouldn't want to take too much of your time. I would like to welcome all members of the engineering family and welcome chairmen of all the sector skills councils who are also part of the driver's seat of the Nigerian Skills Qualifications Framework. I am sure when the ESMBT stands here, he will explain to you what is the role of the sector skills councils and the awarding bodies in the Nigerian Skills Qualifications Framework. So I would like to, on his behalf, welcome you all and wish you well and the best out of this particular occasion. And we hope that COREN will be in the driver's seat of this particular qualifications framework. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please, a better round of applause for him. Thank you. Please join me to welcome, for his welcome address, the President and Chairman in Council of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, none other than Engineer Professor Sadiq Zubair Abubakar, Fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, Fellow Academy of Engineering. A better resounding applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome the Senior Special Assistant to Mr. President on Technical, Vocational, and Entrepreneurship Education, Madam Abiola Ogundade, here ably represented by the Executive Secretary of MBTE, who is supposed to represent Mr. President to inaugurate the Sector Skill Council. I also would like to recognize the chairman of the National Skill Council and the person of our dear Vice President of Nigeria, again ably represented by a member of the National Skill Council in the person of the Director General of NAPTIN, Dr. Nagudi, also here in his own capacity as a member of the National Skill Council. I also would like to recognize the presence of our dear Madam President, the President of NSE, Engineer Margaret Aina Oguntala. You're welcome, Madam. The Executive Secretary is also here, ably represented by one of my childhood friends, the Director of Skills in MBTE, Engineer ADK Mohammed. You are ably welcome, sir. Our guest, the keynote speaker, who happens to be the global advocate of what we are doing today, Engineer Professor Megad Johori Magad, the President of Malaysian Engineering Body and a member of the International Engineering Alliance, and the Global Chair of the Dublin Accord that recognizes this same caliber of expert that we are trying to inaugurate today. Professor Megad, you are also welcome. It is very important. I'm giving my special recognition to the members of the council, of this Sector Skill Council for Engineering. I have recognized that they have been recognized. There are about 12 of them. I'm sure we are going to allow them to have some personal introduction, because it's very important for us to understand the concept of what we are trying to do today. Having said this, I would like to welcome all past presidents of COREN and NSE, past registrars, past ES, fellows of our dear societies of engineering, of technologies, of technician and of craftsmen. Our dear colleagues, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor and privilege to address this assembly today as the Sector Skill Council awarding body for the Sector Skill Council for Engineering on the historic occasion of inaugurating the council. Let me begin by extending my profound appreciation and recognition to the role played by the National Skill Council, led by the Vice President, Kashin Shetima, GCON, the National Board for Technical Education, led by our amiable, indefatigable Professor Idris Bugaje, the Council, of course, for the Regulation of Engineering, and other members and stakeholders who facilitated the actualization of the skills development as a critical focus for the current administration to advance on a sustainable manner the national economy. Indeed, today marks a significant milestone in our journey towards enhancing skill and competencies of workforce in the engineering sector in Nigeria. Let me also dutifully appreciate the Senior Special Assistant to Mr. President on Technical, Vocational, and Entrepreneurship Education, Madam Abiola Ogundade, for taking time out to attend this very auspicious occasion, ably represented by the ES of MBTE. The engineering is no doubt a vital endeavor driving the critical sectors of the nation economy through the provision of gainful employment, advanced infrastructural development, and sustained economic growth. Engineering, however, also faces numerous challenges, including shortage of skilled labor, commensurate with the advances recorded in the various disciplines across the engineering cadres. Aging qualified practitioners, slow rate of evolution of skills to match contemporary practices, and gestation period of attaining competencies and proficiencies, etc. As we struggle to attain the sustainable economic growth and development, it is imperative that we tackle these challenges, provide solutions to them towards ensuring skills development of the workforce across the various engineering fields and cadres. It is important to state that the Sector Skill Council for Engineering is a private sector-led, with 70% membership of the council being drawn from the private sector, comprising of key stakeholders in the 10 dominant sectors of our economy. Permit me to highlight the key roles of the council as provided in the National Skill Council Qualification Framework approved by the Federal Executive Council. Some of the key functions, I have highlighted about 7 of them, but for the sake of time, I'm sure we are going to share the speech. Please permit me to skip them, but there are about 10 of them. Also, in line with these functions, the Council for the Engineering is expected to develop occupational standards in the trade areas at the level of level 1 to level 5, covering the different engineering trades, services, consultancies, vendoring, and other things. Similarly, the key responsibilities and role of the awarding body, of which COREN is that body, they are also enumerated in my speech, about 10 of them. I would also like to skip them because I'm sure we are going to have a detailed discussion on them later after the inauguration. To ensure the smooth take-up of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering and to sustain its operation to regulate especially the engineering artisans in the informal sector, COREN developed what we call the guideline manual, additional manual that we have painstakingly sat down and developed. We have also provided some of the strategies that we believe we are going to use to advance the cause of this new sector that is going to change the narration in our country. The Sector Skill Council will serve as a platform for collaboration among stakeholders in the country, including agencies, educational institutions, industrial associations, employers of labor, manufacturers, professional bodies, regulators, and workers' representatives. They are to facilitate the development of industry-driven training programs, certification standards, and accreditation mechanism to ensure that the nation's workforce is equipped with relevant, up-to-date, and state-of-the-art skills. The Council shall develop a comprehensive plan to upskill and train the teeming artisans in the engineering endeavors over the period. This plan, which can be expanded with sponsorship, will map out ways to develop national skill database for the engineering personnel operating in the industry, facilitate the establishment and accreditation of training centers in key locations across the country, and implement a certification program that is recognized by employers and industry stakeholders. These ambitious goals align with the renewed hope agenda of the present administration, as well as the objective of the National Skill Council's framework which aims to promote the recognition, validation, and certification of skill acquired through formal, non-formal, and informal learning. Lifelong learning is now recognized globally. The Skill Council will pursue a vigorous recognition of prior knowledge program to certify and uplift the competencies of the nation's artisans who are required to upskill and improve their performance and income levels. This, we believe, will revitalize the informally trained artisans in the engineering sector of the country and organize them to be able to acquire and be certified in the long run. COREN is committed to working closely with the Council as well as with the regulator of this whole program, which is MBTE, to facilitate the development of a comprehensive training and certification program that addresses the specific needs of engineering artisans in the relevant sectors of our economy. Such program will comprise a wide range of skills across the different competencies and proficiencies. COREN will leverage on technology and digital platform to provide accessible and flexible training opportunities for such artisans, irrespective of their location, to trigger positive impact on the industry and the economy at large. In addition to upskilling and training, COREN will promote innovations and best practices in the target sectors, facilitating knowledge exchange and collaboration among stakeholders, as well as identify trends and technologies that can enhance productivity and sustainability. Mr. Chairman of the NSC, representative of the Special Assistant to the President, MBTE, Executive Secretary, and Madam President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I'm confident that with the support of our partners and stakeholders, COREN, MBTE, and the Council will be able to achieve the set objectives and create skilled, competent, and competitive workforce that will drive the growth and prosperity of our great nation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Council that are to be inaugurated, I thank you for attending and supporting this event. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
A very resounding applause for the President and the Chairman in Council for the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. Thank you so much, Mr. President. At this juncture, I would like to welcome to the podium for his speech and the inauguration of the Council members, the Executive Secretary of the National Board for Technical Education, Engineer Professor Idris Muhammad Bugaje. Please let's welcome him. We can do better.
The chairman of the occasion, the president of COREN, the president of the NSC, our very senior colleagues, including the former president of COREN, Engineer Gulma, and other important dignitaries. Please permit me to stand on the well-established protocol. I'm standing in for the Senior Special Assistant Ms. Abiola Ogundede, who is unavoidably absent. And on my behalf, I'm going to do the inauguration of this very important Sector Skill Council. But before the inauguration, I would like to make a very short, brief remark by saying that today we are making history. History in the development of the engineering profession in Nigeria with the inauguration of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering to join 19 other sector skill councils. So it's better late than never. Engineering should have been among the first to be inaugurated, but it's not so bad even now. So far, we have inaugurated councils for building and construction. They are doing very well. They have developed about 18 occupational standards on skills for that sector. We have inaugurated others for hospitality, occupational health and safety, oil and gas, geriatrics, which is for the senior citizens, even herbal medicine and homeland security, the power sector, the automotive industry, fashion design, ICT, etc. The role of the sector skill councils under the Nigerian Skills Qualification Framework, NSQF, cannot be overemphasized. They are supposed to be industry-led, and they are assigned the responsibility to identify the skill gaps in our industries and the country at large, and to develop occupational standards. Occupational standards are the curricula, but developed by industry, because they know the skills, the competencies needed, to perform in those industries. They are also responsible to ensure that quality is assured and certification of those skills is done through the awarding body. The chairman of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering the chairmanship has been accepted graciously by the Nigerian Academy of Engineering, while COREN has accepted to be the awarding body. These roles of chairmanship is tenured. So probably in the next 3 to 5 years, another industry leader would be elected to be the chair. The sector skill councils shall promote the Nigerian Skills Qualification, NSQ, which has 9 levels, level 1 to 9. And it has been approved by the National Council on Skills, chaired by His Excellency the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria. We must commend the current Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, for moving the National Council on Skills on a fast track, and for getting NSQ to be admitted into the scheme of service, and for working to have an NSQF Act, which is now in the pipeline, with a provision for National Skills Fund. I'm mentioning this because between 2017 to 2023, the National Council on Skills met only twice. But between 2023 to date, the National Council on Skills has met 3 times. This is very commendable. The greatest challenge facing the new Sector Skill Council for Engineering is repositioning the pyramid of the cadres of engineering in Nigeria. As of now, the pyramid is upside down. What the ILO has recommended is, for every one engineer from the university, you require 5 technologists and technicians from the polytechnics. And then for each technician or technician or technologist, you require also 5 artisans and craftsmen. Unfortunately, today in Nigeria, we have more engineers than even the technologists, more faculties of engineering in universities than even the schools of engineering and polytechnics, not to talk of craftsmen and artisans. And that's why we have very serious skill gaps. The total number of technical colleges is 129 against 15,000 secondary schools, senior secondary schools in Nigeria, less than 1%. So surely the pyramid is upside down. This is one of the greatest challenges which must be resolved by the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. And this is the reason why Nigeria is importing skills from ECOWAS and from Asia. The construction industries, we are very aware, the best tilers, the best finishers, and the best POP, we get those artisans from Togo and Benin. In the oil and gas sector, we are aware of how Indonesians, Filipinos have dominated underwater welding and other skills in the oil and gas sector. Chinese artisans did the railway expansion program. Indian technicians and artisans built the celebrated Dangote refinery. Dangote refinery, from their documentary, employed about 150,000 workers. 9% came from India. 9% of 150 is 11,500. We are not blaming Dangote for importing them. We are blaming the Nigerian skills ecosystem for not producing those pipe fitters, welders, artisans, and so on. So this is one of the challenges which must be addressed by this new council. And if we do not do it, Mambila Power Project, the Trans-African gas pipeline to deliver Nigerian natural gas to Europe, will all be delivered with imported skilled labor. The Sector Skill Council for Engineering should also engage the informal sector and formalize the training. The president of COREN has already alluded to that. The Nigerian economy is 75% informal. So the informal sector cannot be ignored. We must therefore find a way to engage the informal sector, to upgrade training, the informal training going on there, to introduce quality assurance, to use our national occupation standards, and to give certification for those skills. Doing this is a major assignment of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. Examples of the informal sector is the Panteka market in Kaduna, which houses 38,000 apprentices. That number is more than the students in Kaduna Polytechnic who are doing informal training but without certificates. So they are chalked up in that place. Now certification for them to move to another sector. So these are supposed to be addressed. We have Ariaria market in Aba, the shoe market, computer village in Ikeja, the Kofarua market in Kano, the Apple mechanic village here in Abuja, the roadside welders all over the country, etc. These are typical examples of the informal sector, and these are the ones that the Sector Skill Council must engage so that we can standardize the training, we can offer them NSQ certification, and we can train the master craftsmen as quality assurance assessors. And eventually, COREN should start to license all artisans and craftsmen before they could practice. These licensed artisans can be deployed into national infrastructural projects instead of importing labor from ECOWAS and from Asia. Before I end my remarks, let me emphasize on the separation of power between the training provider, the awarding body, and the regulator. In the skills ecosystem, the training center is not allowed to award certificate. It's not like your degree and your diploma, where the Senate and the academic board will award the certificates. In the skills ecosystem, the awarding body must be a professional body in that area. They are the only ones allowed to award certification. There is separation of power between the regulator, the awarding body, and the training center. This is based on global best practices. The misadventure of the Industrial Training Fund in amending its act to take over all these three roles must be called to order. The proposed ITF Amendment Act 2024 will not only clash with existing laws, including the law establishing COREN, but it will create an unprecedented chaos in the Nigerian skills ecosystem and compromise standards. We know ITF, since its establishment, was supposed to be doing funding training of students under SIWES, Students Industrial Work Experience Scheme. This program today has been abandoned completely. ITF has set up training centers all over the country. And now they want to become an awarding body, taking over the job of COREN, Council for Builders, Council for Hospitality, etc., etc. And they even want to become the regulator of the skills sector. ITF seems to be intoxicated by the huge tax they collect from industries. And they believe they can find their way in the National Assembly by any means necessary. This must be stopped. Intoxication. Let me explain this word, intoxication. Intoxication is not only from alcohol or abuse of substance, drugs, etc. Sometimes if you have too much money, you become intoxicated. And that's what's happening to ITF. I think the new DG of ITF is a medical doctor who has no experience in skills. And he wants to take up over everybody's job in the ecosystem. I think this must be checked. And I hope our National Assembly will not become a police station where you can go and pay your way. They should stand up to this challenge. Finally, I would like to congratulate the chair and all members of the new sector skill councils for engineering being inaugurated today on their selection and election to this important national assignment. We are equally grateful to COREN for hosting the launch, and I would like to appeal to the president of COREN to please allow the 10 members of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering to please kindly stand up for recognition. The chair is the Nigerian Academy of Engineering, and there are other industry members, 7 of them from industry and 3 others from the public sector. May I please humbly request you to stand up for recognition, the members of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. I wish you a very successful tenure. May God bless you all. And on behalf of the Senior Special Assistant to Mr. President on TVEE, Ms. Abiola Ogundade, I inaugurate the Sector Skill Council for Engineering today, the 4th of September, 2024. May God bless you. You can have your seats. May Allah guide and bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, sir. Please, I would like to call up the members of the Sector Skills Council for Engineering who were just inaugurated. They have to come up to the podium for a proper inauguration. But before mentioning their names, I would like to recognize, as the ES was taking his speech, some members, dignitaries actually walked into the hall, and I would like to recognize their presence. Engineer Jennifer Adihije, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers. She is the MD CEO of the Niger Delta Power Holding Company. You're welcome, ma'am. We also have Engineer Abdullahi Kashim, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers. He's the Executive Director Generations of the NDPH. You're welcome, sir. Engineer Bello Babayo Bello, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers. He's Executive Director Networks of the NDPH. You're welcome. So at this point, I would like to very quickly call the members of the council who have just been inaugurated to come up stage. Please, once you hear your name, make your way forward. I would like to start in no particular order. The chairman of the Sector Skills Council for Engineering, Engineer Professor Rahman Adisa Bello, fellow Academy of Engineering. He is the president of the Nigerian Academy of Engineering. I would also like to welcome upstage Engineer Olaniyon O.K. Abiodun. He is the lead coordinator project of Asharami Synergy Ashara Group Company. He is representing the aviation and aerospace sector. The MD CEO of Zaria Fertilizer and Rice Milling, Dr. Muhammadu Maina. He's representing the agro-allied industry. Please, let's appreciate them as they come. The project director, Raz Construction, Abdulmalik Abubakar, representing the construction sector. Also to be inaugurated is the MD CEO of Kian Smith Trade and Company Limited, representing the mining sector, Ms. Nere Emiko. Ms. Nere Emiko. We have the president of the Fertilizer Producers and Suppliers Association of Nigeria, FEPSAN, representing the manufacturing sector. The managing director of Stats Marine Nigeria Limited, Ronye Eboj, representing the maritime sector. We have the executive director of Chenotech Nigeria Limited, Engineer Obi Silvanus Emegako, representing the oil and gas sector. We have the executive director, Coleman Wires and Cables, Engineer Michael O.K. Onafoakan, representing the power and energy sector. The managing principal partner, 3Logi Limited, Mr. Nasiruddin B. Yakubu, representing the telecommunication sector. The MD CEO of Red Star Express PLC, Mr. Awal Babura Badamasi, representing the transport sector. We have to be inaugurated the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Vice Chairman of the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, Mr. Olatunji Bello. We also have Honorable Umar Usman Mekenkule, Fellow NAYEC. You're welcome, sir. He's representing the Nigerian Association of Engineering Craftsmen. Engineer Dr. Dauda A. Folarin, Fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers. He is the member representing COMPODET, that's a Committee of Deans of Engineering of Polytechnics and Colleges of Technology. We also have the Secretary of the Council, the Sector Skill Council for Engineering, Engine Tech Aminu M. Kangiwa, from the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN. And lastly, but not the least, we have Engineer Bashir Dati Amin, member Nigerian Society of Engineers, to also be the secretary from the National Board for Technical Education. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the members of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. Congratulations. I would like to invite the dignitaries, the president of COREN, the ES of NBTE, to please take a group photograph with them. I would also like to invite the president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers to join them in the group photograph, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to invite Engineer Ademola Isaac Olorunfemi, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, to join them in the group photograph. He will be representing the chairman of the president of the Nigerian Academy of Engineering. The MD CEO of NDPHC, ma'am, Engineer Jennifer, please join them in the group photograph. Please, all members that have been inaugurated should go to the table by the right to officially sign off. Thank you. While I also invite the chairman of the council that has just been inaugurated, Engineer Professor Rahman Adisa Bello, to give his acceptance speech. ably represented by Engineer Ademola Isaac Olorunfemi, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers.
The Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented, the President of COREN, the NSC President, very distinguished personalities, including the Chairman, Niger Power Data Holding, as well as guests from Sector Skill Accords, very distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I speak for the President of the Academy of Engineering, Engineer Professor Rahim Bello, who is unavoidably absent. On behalf of my colleague, now this is Rahim Bello speaking now, the members of the Sector Skill Council, we are glad to accept this responsibility. We know it's a huge one, and we're glad to do it. We like to rely on the powerful speech of the Vice President of the country, delivered by the MPT Secretary, ES, on behalf of the SSA Sector Skills. We will ensure that that is followed up and that the bill trying to disfigure vocational skills in Nigeria is not allowed to see the light of the day. We assure you that we work diligently to make that happen. I believe at the next Current Assembly, we will give a report, even though there will be a milestone report, we'll give a delay report by then. Let me, in closing, recognize my president, the President of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and all the council members of COREN. Again, thank you for this honor of appointing the Academy of Engineering and our president as the chairman of the Sector Skills Council for Engineering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the acceptance speech. Very quickly, we'll be taking 3 goodwill messages. The first is from the Director General of NAPTIN, Mr. Ahmed Bolaji Nagode. Please, can we welcome him? Please, sir, you have 1 minute.
Well, if I can do less than 1 minute, I would like to do that. I want to stand on already established protocol. I want to congratulate the newly inaugurated Council for Engineering, Skills Council for Engineering, the Executive Director, the Executive Secretary, NBTE, and the President, COREN, have spoken eloquently and passionately on the roles and the importance of the Sector Skills Council. I want to commend the effort of the Chairman, National Council on Skills, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Kashim Shettima, GCON, for the passion in driving skills development in Nigeria. Let me say that skills is the way to go. Development of skills, the way to go, because if we want to build jobs and also to provide highly skilled workforce for the Nigerian economy, we need to focus on building on the foot soldiers. Those are the foot soldiers that operate and maintain, the sector. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want to talk on the need, to build special fund for the skills development. The ES have spoken, eloquently on this, but I want to echo the need, to really provide, funds. It becomes more imperative looking at Nigeria's leadership role in Africa, especially with ACFTA, Africa Continental Free Trade, Agreement. There is a need for Nigeria to export skills, not that we will be importing skills, and this will help, in the president's agenda of economic growth and job creation. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to congratulate the newly inaugurated Skills Council for Engineering, and I look forward to welcome you on board when we have our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Join me in welcoming for his goodwill message the chair of the Dublin Accord, the president of the Malaysian Society of Engineering and Technology, Engineer Professor Megat Johari Megat Mohammed Noor.
Thank you, Engineer Precious. On behalf of the Dublin Accord Chair, I would like to congratulate COREN for bringing this General Assembly into the fold, whereby you do have now the skills development. And not only skills development, you also have the engineers, the technologists, technicians, now completing the whole team. I think as far as most countries are concerned, you don't find everybody under the same roof. So this is a good effort. As we know, the family or the fraternity, the engineering fraternity is an important fraternity, and we cannot work in silos. Engineers, technologists, and technicians, as well as craftsmen and artisans, are supposed to work as a team. And rightly so, COREN, as the regulatory body regulating all these different bodies under the COREN for engineers, technologists, technicians, and craftsmen and artisans, this is definitely a way to go for most countries who would like to develop and become an important contribution to not only to Nigeria, but also to the world. The inverted pyramid that we've been hearing is not only common to Nigeria, it is also common to many other countries, by virtue that the status of the artisans, craftsmen, technicians, and even technologists have often been forgotten, and the focus had always been on the engineers. I think this is a good occasion, and COREN is actually doing it right. So with that, congratulations again to COREN and the newly appointed Council for Engineering on Skills Development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The last goodwill message we'll be taking will be from the president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, Engineer Margaret Aina Oguntala, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, fellow Nigerian Society of Chemical Engineers. We can make that applause more resounding.
The President of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, Engineer Professor Sadiq Zubair Abubakar, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers. The Executive Secretary of NBTE, of course, the Chair Dublin Accord. I can see some of my past presidents here, past presidents of COREN as well, very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for us to have the opportunity of giving a goodwill message at this very auspicious event. And I'd like to start by congratulating COREN for this feat. Becoming a full member of the National Skills Council is very commendable. It's something that COREN has been working on for some time, but attaining this now is commendable. And I'd like to congratulate the president and indeed the council members, of which I am a member, fortunately, for this very important feat. I'd also like to reiterate the fact that all the way the Nigerian Society of Engineers will continue to collaborate with COREN. We do realize the fact that there is no doubt that skills development is the way to go. And we have keyed into that a long time ago. We are actually champions of TVET. And for the past 2 years, we've had programs on TVET. So it will be very easy for us to key into what is happening now and also join COREN to move this matter forward. I'd also like to congratulate all the members of the council that were inaugurated today. And particularly, I want to congratulate the chairman, Engineer Professor Rahman Bello, FNSC, FANG. And for accepting, he really did not have much of a choice, did he? So I congratulate all engineers because indeed this shows that our work is being recognized, and then it also means that we have a lot more work to do. The reward for hard work, they say, is more work. So get ready and do more work, and then we'll together move this nation to greater heights. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Madam President. We're gradually rounding up the inauguration of the Sector Skill Council for Engineering. And on this note, I would like to welcome upstage for the vote of thanks the Registrar of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, COREN, Engineer Professor Adisa Ademola Bello, fellow Nigerian Society of Engineers, fellow Academy of Engineering. Please, we can do better with that applause. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, mine is just to thank all that are here, especially the representative of the Vice President of Nigeria, who gave a goodwill message, the ES of MBTE, and my own president, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen that are here. We want to thank you very much. We know we have embarked on a journey, but with your support, we will get there. Thank you so very much for being part of this.
Thank you very much, the Registrar of the Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria. Can we give him another round of applause? Thank you very much. We'll be moving on very quickly to the workshop on admission requirements into Sydney and Dublin Accords of IEA for the engineering family in Nigeria under the leadership of COREN. It is therefore my singular honor and privilege to welcome up for the workshop Engineer Professor Megat Johari Megat Mohammed Noor, Chair Dublin Accord and Governing Group at the IEA, President Malaysian Society of Engineering and Technology. A round of applause, please. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we have the clicker? I have two types of PowerPoint. One is for the first session, which is the session related to Sydney and Dublin Accord. Thank you. If I can get the clicker and operate myself, that's better. Right. So in the meantime, if anyone who is operating the computer, you can press next. Right. We'll pass on this one. Let's go straight because time is probably the essence now. Next. Yesterday, we talked about the mark of quality. And quality here, as we know, relates to engineering education as the first one. And Sydney and Dublin is all about education. That means that's the entry point whereby the knowledge of the persons who are entering the sector, whether as engineers, engineering technologies, or engineering technicians, they have knowledge that is acceptable for the practice. Practice as engineers, technologists, technicians, and in this particular case, the focus is on 3 different areas, which is engineers, technologists, and technicians. And the technologists and the technician is what I'm going to cover this morning, the education part. Next. You can press everything. My focus is going to be on the IEA, right? The IEA is the International Engineering Alliance. The alliance was first mooted with Washington Accord. And everyone thought when we call it Washington Accord, it is the hegemony of the United States. It is not. It's just that the ideas of Washington Accord was mooted in 1989, and it was done in Washington. And that's why it was called Washington Accord. And from that time onwards, more education accords are in place, which is the Sydney and the Dublin. And it comes under the purview of the International Engineering Alliance. And if we look here, next. It has sort of changed its structure. Initially, it was very much of like a loose organization with the founders, and now we have a General Assembly, and the General Assembly meets every year. It used to be called an International Engineering Meetings, but now it is called an International Engineering Alliance. And we have here, for example, the competence agreement. Competence agreements are meant for the engineers, engineering technologies, as well as the engineering technicians. And there are 4 of them, and 2, if you see on my right, further right, they are meant for the engineers. There is the APEX as well as the International Professional Engineering Agreement. Those 2 are about equivalent, but the APEX is a smaller body compared to the IPEA because APEX relates to the Asia-Pacific region only. And then we have the IETA and the AIET. And these are meant for substantial equivalence in practice at the professional level as far as engineering technologies and engineering technicians are concerned. And the accord that I'm going to speak on, which is the Sydney and Dublin, the sister accord of the Washington. Washington is meant for engineers. That means a bachelor's degree in engineering. It's a 4-year qualification, whereas the Sydney is expected to be for 3 years in terms of education, and Dublin 2 years. So that's the difference between the 3 of them. Next. The way that it is being governed at the moment there is a chair and a deputy chair for the International Engineering Alliance. Normally, they are being appointed from among the 7 council, executive, they call it. And these are the executive responsible to manage or administer the accords and the agreements. So, and at the moment, the chair for the Dublin Accord is being led by yours truly, and my deputy is from South Africa at the moment. And the secretariat is in New Zealand. It is based at Engineering New Zealand. That's the organization that has been supporting as a secretariat from the beginning. Next. Okay, let's see. Good. Thank you, Professor Adisa. Now, if you look at this, I would like to share the Malaysian scenario first. We have these 12 years of education before entering into the Washington Accord qualified programs, a bachelor's of engineering. And at the same time, to enter the bachelor's of engineering technology, we also require 12 years of education. But as far as the duration of study is concerned, as far as Malaysia is concerned, as well as United States, we have a 4-year program for the engineering technology, despite Sydney Accord says 3 years. 3 years is the minimum. So 12 years of schooling plus 3 years of a bachelor's degree would be the minimum for you to have a Sydney Accord equivalent qualification. And if you look at towards my right, you'll find that as far as Dublin Accord is concerned, in Malaysia we use 2.5 years to 3 years after 11 years of schooling. Mind you, Dublin Accord never specify what is the education or the pre-education before they actually attend the Dublin Accord equivalent qualification of 2 years. It is silence about it. But in Malaysia, we use 11 years. That means immediately after the O-levels equivalent, they can actually enter the engineering technician program. Right. Works once. Nope. Okay. Upon qualifying at the entry level, we have an assessment, which is what we call as... Is working? Yeah, this one, right? Okay. So we have this 3 years experience for someone who wants to become a professional engineer, or if someone wants to become a professional engineering technologist. Whereas professional engineering technicians, we have this also an equivalent of about 2 to 3 years of experience, and there will be an assessment. So this is the professional assessment conducted in Malaysia. And it varies. This assessment varies. In our case, the practice internationally varies, but in our case in Malaysia, they will have to be examined. They will have to sit for a special examination before they can qualify to become a professional engineer or a professional engineering technologist or a professional technician. Now, Nope, it's not. Okay. Maybe I think somebody needs to operate from there. We allow articulations. That means to say, we allow articulation for someone who is doing engineering technician program. They can articulate to do the technologies program. And at the same time, the technologies can also articulate to do the engineering program. But that articulation does not happen at the education level. Usually it happens when someone is actually already practicing. So we will have a special, what we call as the GAP, Graduate Assessment Program, to enable us to ensure that the knowledge requirements are of the same expectations. Now, if you look at the three, Washington, Sydney, and Dublin, and that's how it is actually being organized in Malaysia. So everything is under the Board of Engineers Malaysia, like what happens in COREN. Now, we don't have craftsmen for now. And the authorities would then draw all the professionals in case they need the services. Services in terms of providing engineering services, they would have to ensure that these people are registered with the Board of Engineers Malaysia. So some of the authorities are there, and they would need these people to be at least registered either at the entry level or at the professional level. So when it comes to COREN, we know that you have all these four categories, right? The engineering persons, I call them engineering persons. It's a family in your case, right? We've seen that yesterday. And if you look at how it is being organized in Nigeria, we would expect that 4 years qualification to be the minimum. And there must be 12 years of education. Now, COREN has to ensure that to take place in the first place when it comes to Washington Accord. Now, then you have this HND. We've been talking about HND yesterday, your Higher National Diploma, mostly offered by the polytechnics, I presume. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was just browsing through the website, and they becomes technologists. But whether there is a need for the experience, presumably there are, and I expect that should be about 3 to 4 years, and it varies from one country to another, before they can be registered. Now, they will be registered as engineering technologists. I think it's missing there. It's called registered engineering technologists. And then you do have your national diploma, right? And that national diploma is it a 2 years program? This is where what I would like to know a bit more as far as the Nigerian education system is. And these are very important areas to be considered. For you to become a signatory to the Sydney and Dublin, this articulation must be clearly laid out. The number of years, as well as what would be the entry point for someone who wants to become an engineering technician or engineering technologist. So here, the question mark here is, what will be the pre-tertiary education that you require? Is it going to be 12 years? Or is it going to be less than 12? Right? And as far as Sydney Accord is concerned, it must be a minimum of 12 years of education before one can progress to a 3-year program for Sydney Accord. When it comes to Dublin, as I mentioned just now, it is not specified as to the pre-tertiary. And I consider all the three of them are tertiary education. And when it is not specified, we have to be realistic. What is it? So what is it being practiced in Nigeria? So this has got to be ascertained first. And that's how the Sydney and the Dublin will be looked at. We've been talking about skills, right? None here mentioned about skills. The focus has always been on the knowledge component. But how you gain your knowledge can be through skills as well. But the most important is, what is the knowledge expected of technicians, technologists, and engineers? And how to get this knowledge, you could employ the practice method. It can be a practical approach, and especially so for the Dublin and the Sydney. And then, of course, you can actually then move at the professional competency level, right? I don't intend to expound on this. Okay. I'm not controlling it, I presume. The latest graduate competencies by the IEA, right? They call it graduate attributes and professional competencies. These are considered as the benchmark requirements for Sydney, Dublin, Washington, or even the professional competencies. And you find here, for example, the first 4, these are related to the education. They specify, for example, what are the graduate attributes, the kind of graduates, what sort of outcomes they should have, right? Whether they are at Washington, Sydney, or Dublin. What are the attributes? This particular document specifies it, and the latest is the 2021 version. And then they also mention what are the knowledge profiles. It doesn't say what is the volume of the knowledge, of the discipline, of the subdiscipline, but it says that if you need to have the knowledge component of a curriculum, what are the profiles? And the number of profiles at the moment is 9. For example, how much of mathematics, how much of the sciences, how much of the engineering, how much of the skills, and so on. So it has this, what is called as the profile. Normally, this will be associated with the curriculum. And then we also have what is called as range of engineering activities. This would relate to the sort of work. That means eventually these graduates are going to work in the relevant activities. So before they go to work, they are actually exposed at the education level. The kind of activities that typically what an engineer would be doing, what a technician would be doing. These are called the engineering activities. And especially so with these engineering activities, the expectation is they should be able to communicate about the activities that they conduct. Right? That's very important. So communication is one of the essential features when it comes to engineering activities. You should be able to communicate with the engineers, technologists, technicians, and even the public or the government, right? The other one is about the range of problem identification and solving. These are the ones that differentiate the different levels, whether they are Washington, Sydney, or Dublin. And there are 7 of them. For example, Washington Accord requires everyone to be able to solve complex problems. A complex problem is a problem that requires in-depth knowledge. And it also requires a number of domains that are associated with it. For example, health, safety, legal, and many others. So you have the breadth of it and you have the depth of knowledge. That is what a complex problem would require. Whereas when you look at the range of problem solving for the engineering technologies, it doesn't say that you have to solve complex problems. What it says is you can actually solve broadly defined. Broadly defined, there is always a question mark here. What do we mean by broadly defined? What it means here is that, of course, it need not have to be complex. It can be if you want, but most likely it doesn't require someone to actually use mathematics and sciences heavily. Right? You don't have to derive things. You can apply most of the principles to solve the problem. And this is where the differentiation between Sydney and Dublin is quite gray. But the main difference, as you can see, is the 3 years and the 4 years. So you are very much into the theory side with the engineers, whereas the 3 years is more of the applied side. So you'll be applying most of the time, but you're not expected to derive, to come up with new principles and so on, right? And that's how we differentiate it. And then when it comes to the knowledge and attitude profile, the current version is saying that whatever solutions that you are providing, it should lead to sustainable development goals. There are 17 sustainable development goals that we know of, the UN, and your program eventually will produce engineers or engineering technologies or engineering technicians who are solving the problems related to attaining the sustainable development goals. So that is the context of the curriculum. So which means to say, there have been cases where we solve problem, but then we did not look from the side of the economy, or we focus only on the economy. We don't look at the climate change. We don't look at what is going to be the impact on the environment, to the society, and so on. Whereas engineering relates to the society. It relates to the environment that we are working on. So this is where the curriculum is tailored in the context of solving the sustainable development goals. They are the bigger goals, right? And if you were to divide the 17 sustainable development goals, you'll find that the first category relates to people. The first 6 of them actually relates to people. And one of them is about clean water. It relates to the health of the people. And the next 6 of that development goal is all about engineering, right? It's all about engineering. How do you promote wealth, right? And we've been talking about shared prosperity yesterday. That wealth generation comes with the next 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's the very reason you find that the context, whether you are in Washington, Sydney, or Dublin, the context is going to be solving the Sustainable Development Goal in that context. Next. So when we talk about graduate attributes, it is about your ability to assess individual person. That means in your classroom, you are going to make sure that every single person is being evaluated of the outcome, right? And these outcomes can be assessed. So it's not like what it used to be. The objective is they need to have that knowledge. Now, the focus is on the students. What are their abilities? What are the outcomes that they should have? And we need to assess, and that assessment is assessing the individual. Next. Next. Now, this is a typical, I would say, just an example, whereby if you look at the x-axis, you have the skills, and then you have the knowledge. On one side is the skill, the other side is knowledge, the x-axis, right? Next. And above that line is about skills, and below the line is about knowledge. Right? And if you look at engineering or engineering technologies right to the apprentice, anything below the line is all about knowledge. Anything above the line is all about skills, right? So if we do have a curriculum, it's not going to be exactly a straight line. It may not be. But I'm just giving an impression here that you need more skills when it comes to engineering technology, and even more when it comes to the engineering technician program. And these skills eventually will turn into knowledge. That's why the knowledge, the 9 knowledge profile becomes important. So engineering, it's more theory compared to practice. And you'll find that some of the industry would be complaining, why are you producing engineers who doesn't have good practice experience? Because they probably will be looking for the engineering technologies. And if we look at the upside down pyramid, we tend to have more engineers. And these engineers are doing the job of engineering technologies as well. Whereas they are trained to be engineers, they are trained to be more theoretical, they are trained to be creators, right? Developers, designers, and yet the industry may require more of the operators, more of the maintainers, right? So the operation and maintenance are more significant in some of these industry. The manufacturing industry, it doesn't require to have everybody being engineers, but they would require more of the engineering technologies. But the university probably is not contributing, but mainly because, as someone said yesterday, it is the parents and the students themselves who identify whether they want to be, or they want their sons, or the sons want to be engineers or engineering technologists. So this is where clarity, maybe Nigeria needs to look at it. Do you really need all engineers? And as what the ILO mentioned, you definitely need both engineers as well as technologists. But currently, what's happening, most likely, the engineers are doing the job of the technologists, right? So if you're talking about, let's look at your companies. Which of the companies that you have here, organizations, are actually developing new technologies? You might not find that many. Just like in Malaysia, we have about 6,000 companies or engineering organization, in actual fact, about less than 30% is actually going for research and development. So you can't actually produce new technologies when you don't do research, right? And most of the time, the requirements is let's operate and let's maintain the facilities. And you don't need engineers to do that. Engineers can do those jobs, but that's not the domain, the major domain of their training, not that purpose, right? So some of the programs, this is where, when it comes to accreditation, some of the programs like engineering technology would like to turn into engineering. Similarly, engineering wants more practice on it. So you have an overlapping there. You may fall into Sydney, those engineering program, or some of the Sydney program may be really a Washington level. So this is where the difficulty is if, let's say, an institution is not really clear as to what are they producing for. And when it comes to outcome-based, one of the first important things that we always have to remember, where are your graduates going to work? Who is going to employ them? What type of work are they going to do? And that's the very reason when you develop curriculum related to this, you need to engage the industry. The industry that is going to employ your graduates, right? Similarly, craftsmen, it will be the industry that is going to employ those craftsmen. If we talk to them, just like the skills that we heard this morning, if we talk to them, they are the stakeholders, they know exactly what is expected of. So the only danger is they may expect engineering technology level, but you are producing engineers, and your curriculum turn out to be not engineering. Right? I think that's the dilemma that universities will have. No doubt you need to have that engagement with the industry. You need to understand what kind of industry. And if you are producing more than just for Nigeria, if you are producing for the world as well, then you have to think, what are the kind of works that your graduates going to be? And that's where your knowledge profile becomes important. Next. So it is, in Europe, this classification of theoretical and practical engineers have been there for centuries. Right? It has been there. And they complement each other. Right? So the depth may not be as deep when it comes to engineering technology. I'm just giving you some examples here, the differences between Washington, Sydney, and Dublin. This is just one example. For example, if you look at the first category, the first term here, it says you need to apply knowledge of mathematics. All of them has to apply knowledge of mathematics, but it is the depth of mathematics that we talk about. For example, if you look at the technicians, they are going to just apply that knowledge. They may not even go to the calculus, right? Whatever is there, they need to know some mathematics, of course. They need to do some calculation at times. But if you think about engineers, the level of mathematics that we need, you need to develop models. You need to derive things, right? You need to do proper integration when you come with models and so on. That's the reason why the level of mathematics is higher. As compared to the Sydney, the expectation here is very much into applying whatever principles are there in solving a problem. You need not have to derive new things. You don't have to develop new models. You can apply existing models. That's what it means. right? And with the GAPC that I mentioned just now, they do classify, for example, WK1 to WK4. That's the knowledge component. So from there, you know what kind of courses that will be required to handle this. So similarly for the Sydney as well as the Dublin. Those are in details. Next. Next. So there are 11 of them. Next. All right. I did mention about the knowledge profile. This is just an example of the knowledge profile for WA. It talks about systematic theory base, whereas in Sydney, again, systematic theory-based formulation, but the focus is more on the sub-discipline. Engineering technology is very much narrow in nature, although it's very focused, engineering technology. Whereas if you look at some of the engineering technology program, they are wide-based. It covers everything just like engineering. So it doesn't have a special focus. But technically, the engineering technology should be very much a focus or sub-discipline base. And if you look at the next one, the Dublin Accord, as long as you do procedural mathematics, that is appropriate. You don't have to understand the principles behind it. You can just apply it, right? Next. That is just an example, and there are 9 of these profiles. Next. Next. And on problem identification and solving, next, right? Again, there are 3 different components that we see here. For example, number 1, you cannot solve the problem without in-depth knowledge. So if someone has a curriculum where doesn't have any in-depth knowledge, it is not an engineering curriculum. Whereas when it comes to the Sydney level, right, it says that you still need engineering knowledge, right, but emphasis is more on application of it. So it is not about deriving and applying them, but it's just applying them. Whereas the technicians, it requires extensive practical knowledge. That's why if you have a technician program that is too theoretical, it is not really producing technicians, right? So here, you would expect extensive practical and supported by those knowledge profile. Next. Can we go to the next one, please? Right, range of engineering activities. And if you look at the engineering activities here, it involves the use, engineers deal with a lot with the diverse resource. Whereas when it comes to the technologies, they may have slightly less, right? Although a lot of them are quite similar. But when it comes to the technicians, it is very limited. They don't have to deal with everybody. They don't have to deal with everyone, right? Next. Next. Now, all those that we see, I was just giving you a sample of what these attributes are, right? And all those eventually would produce the kind of competencies leading to these competencies. For example, in this particular case, it is about someone who can comprehend and apply universal knowledge. That would be one of the characteristics of an engineer. So if you have that knowledge at the education level, and you're going to build up as you are being trained when you are becoming engineers, these are the sort of competencies that you will get. So in this particular case, the Sydney Accord is going to say you can comprehend, right? You understand, you do comprehend it. You can apply that knowledge, right? As widely normally as accepted, and especially applied to the procedures, processes, system. And you see the kind of engineers here, most likely they are into the manufacturing, they are possibly into the building side of it, right? It doesn't require you to come up with completely new things. Whereas the technicians are going to apply a standardized knowledge. Everything is all structured. They just need to follow those structure, right? But they need to understand what they are doing. That's the difference. They need to understand, but the most important thing is, what are the correct procedures that they need to employ? Remember yesterday somebody was saying we need to regulate someone who is doing testing. Is, for example, calibration being done? So as a technician, they know that they need to calibrate, right? And the techniques for calibration, and it must be done. And this is what the knowledge that's supposed to develop the kind of technicians eventually. All right, next. So what we have here is the integration of the academia. That means when we look at the education side, we would expect that the institution is expected to produce students who have the necessary outcomes where they will later on be formed when they are in the industry and eventually become professional engineers. So there is a good relationship between the two, education as well as training or experience, what you may call here as pupillage in some cases. Next. Now, I don't intend to go into the details of this. I'm just going to stop here. And if you look at the requirements of Sydney and Dublin, right, as I understand, that is the interest of COREN, right? The most important thing is that you must have those criteria in place, policies and procedures. It is similar to what you're doing for the Washington Accord, right? What are the criteria? For example, if we talk about graduate attributes, one of the criteria. Knowledge profile is another criterion, and so on. So those things must be in place, and how do you operate them, right? What are your policies and what are your requirements when it comes to accrediting it? And then with any of this agreement, there are two important things that needs to be done. The IEA is interested to know whether you have a system, you follow your system, and it must be a robust system. That's the first thing. Your system must be robust. Secondly, you must have decision that is consistent. You cannot have one day you agree, the other day you disagree, and you keep on changing in terms of your decision. So these are the two important aspects when it comes to the IEA. And when it comes to the institution, it is important that they have to ensure outcome-based, which is the paradigm shift on education. Please.
Please, we'd like to appeal to you to please be silent. We are at a critical moment of what this elderly person came across the world to tell us. And the whole audience is making noise. Please calm down. Allow us to listen to him carefully at this critical stage, please.
Okay. So here, two important things as I mentioned just now. They are very important. Robustness of your system, and the university or polytechnics or colleges, right? They must ensure it is an outcome-based approach. Education is based on outcomes, which is a paradigm shift from a typical input base that we used to have. And your colleagues who are already in Washington Accord as provisional signatory would know that very well, right? And they are working towards that. So the way that things are being done for Washington Accord is going to be equally applicable for Sydney and Dublin, but the only difference is the criteria that we talk about, the depth of education, the depth of knowledge profile, and complexity of the problem, right? So those are the differences. But processes-wise, they are the same. People will have to apply for accreditation. They will have to be assessed on the outcomes that they had determined, and so on, right? So procedural-wise, it's the same, but the context and the depth, they are different. And this is what we will have to make sure. And it's actually much easier for the Sydney and Dublin as compared to Washington Accord, because Washington Accord expects complex problem to be addressed, right? Whereas the technologies, it's a matter of applying those principles to solve the problem, right? Which is much easier. It need not have to be a complex problem, but broadly defined, which means the uncertainties are limited. It's very narrow compared to the Washington Accord. I think that's, of course, the details you can see later. It is actually in there. So as a conclusion, right, the Sydney and the Dublin Accord, these are international benchmark. You may or may not want to be. You can be better than a benchmark. But that's the minimum benchmark one would say, right? If you are able to do that, then you can safely say you are at least at the international level. The kind of graduates that you produce. Not that you are not at international now, but here is a recognition, it's a process to recognize that you have done a proper quality assurance to ensure that the quality of the graduates is at par with the international graduates under the Sydney and Dublin. And it is important that this recognition actually, if you look at recognition, this recognition is important, especially so with the technologists and the technicians that has not been given careful attention. Such a recognition allows parents and students to actually see that the potential is great as far as engineering technologies and technicians are. By virtue, they are also accepted at the international level. And having said that, you need to consider pathways. For example, we heard about the Skill Development Council just now, right? They may not come with a formal education, but how do you equate them? Is there a topping up required in this case? So this is where the thinking has to be there so that you can embrace the whole community. For example, in Malaysia, we used to be very stringent in having a box mentality, whereby the aircraft maintenance engineers, the marine engineers, even though they are internationally certified, because they do not follow the same pathway, we had disregarded them. But now, the approach is to embrace them. So we tend to equate them, for example, at that level of Dublin Accord, the aircraft maintenance. So we do some kind of a recognition exercise to look at what are the knowledge components that will come from that sort of training of an aircraft maintenance engineer or the marine engineer. And we have the classification. Some of them are classified as engineers, some of them are classified as technologists, some are classified as technicians, depending on the level of qualification or certification that they had undergone. So these are amongst the changes, and in fact the latest change that we have in Malaysia is to look at the skills. So we are trying to equate, and we equate based on the knowledge profile of Dublin, Sydney, and Washington. Now, if you are able to do that, then you can come up with a form of recognition, because Dublin, Sydney, as well as Washington, it's about education accord. It's about the knowledge component that you must have before one can practice as engineers or engineering technologists or engineering technician. So with that, thank you very much for listening.
Can we please give a standing ovation for Engineer Professor Megat Johari Megat. Please a round of applause for him. Thank you very much. That's a very wonderful workshop. I believe we have learned. We quickly recognize Engineer Omorege Ogaide Ihama, Executive Director, Strategy and Commercial, Niger Delta Power Holding Company of Nigeria, and Engineer B.A. Kau, Director, Project, Rural Electrification Agency. Gentlemen, ladies, it is now time for us to go for our tea break, and please, we shall be convening here by 12 noon for us to continue with the other programs. Please, for the tea break, you will go out through the right exit door in front of you. Do not go out through the entrance door. You shall come in through the entrance, but for the tea break, please go out through the front door by your right. Thank you very much. By the time we come back by 12 o'clock, we are resuming by 12, please, to continue with the interactions on technicalities of the OBE implementation, and then submissions from engineering professional associations. Thank you all, and see you at 12 noon. Thanks.